William Shakespeare once said, "All the world's a stage, and all the men and women merely players. They have their exits and their entrances, and one man in his time plays many parts, his acts being 7 ages. This is the 7 Stages Podcast."
7 Stages Podcast.
It's the
7 Stages Podcast.
Hey.
7 Stages Podcast.
Hello, my name's Gardner. I am an MFA graduate student in this program, and we're here with Coco Chanel.
Period. Coco Chanel, a.k.a. Chanel Henderson.
Yeah.
And Kai suggested that everybody say their names, a short snippet of like 30 seconds of what the performance meant to you, and your pronouns.
Yes. We'll start right here next to me, to my left.
It's good back.
Awesome. Hi, I'm Will Kinna. This process was super important to me because I'm graduating. So last show here, and also just a lot of grief and turmoil in the world, So learning how to deal with that with these wonderful individuals has been super, super fun.
I am Fargo, and this show was really meaningful to me for a number of reasons, but most important among them was that it made me a ton of money. I'm raking it in. Advertising deals, commercial spots.
For the audio listeners, Fargo has a giant chain one right now.
Yeah. I've sort of
it's actually blinding us.
Of coins.
Fargo, can you tell the recording what your role in this process was?
Oh yes, I was the director.
Hello, I'm Francesco Leandri. Is there a certain spot I should be? Okay, just making sure. I'm Francesco Leandri. I use they, them pronouns. This process was really important to me because it allowed me to see what was possible, what great art you can make with a couple of friends and a really old piece of text. We may have some people joining us.
Thank you for announcing that.
These are their footsteps.
Yeah, Foley. Yeah, let's do some Foley work.
Yeah.
Audio recording, but yeah. Come on in.
Come on in.
And we're going all around, getting everyone's names and what the show meant to you all. So, should we do?
Okay, now we have Alex, who's on the phone. All right, Alex, did you hear the prompt?
No, what's the prompt?
Do you
Your name, your pronoun, and about 30 seconds of what the show / process meant to you.
Can you hear me at all?
Yeah.
Is it epic or what?
Yeah, we got you.
It's epic, Alex.
My name is Mungo. I use they, them pronouns. I am, this process is really great for me. I think it really empowered me to, explore performance art in a way I don't think I ever really did before. Specifically in, the writing sense. Yeah. I think that, the process is really empowering to, never say no to things and just kind of, let things flow and see what happens.
Woo!
Thank you.
Thank
Woo!
you. See, I told you it sounded cool if everyone.
Hello, I am EJ Roeder. I use she, her pronouns. I am also, same as Will, I'm a graduating senior. And so this process and the show was very, very important to me. Just being my last show here at Towson, but also the opportunity to not only work for the first time with Devised Theater, but to share the stage with some of the most kind, lovely, and talented people that I've ever met. So I'm very grateful for that.
Excellent.
I'm Rowan, Gardner. I use she, her, or they, them pronouns, and I loved this process. I loved, especially, I think, getting to write things and then perform them, like be able to make things and do it. I've never done that before, and it's really exciting to be the sausage and to make the sausage and to everybody's the sausage together when you think about it. And that was the show for me. It was just so many. Some sausages came and went, but we all made a big sausage.
Well, now that I'm full off of sausages.
Keep this going. We should try and get as much mileage out of this as we can.
My name is Lenox Kamara. I go by he, him pronouns. I am also a senior in the... What do I do? What do I do here? Yeah, theater studies senior here at Towson. This process for Antigone, wow, I love devising. Devising was one of the first forms of theater that I learned in community college. So I'm glad that I was able to wrap up my time here at Towson doing that. But in particular, exploring more of my artistry with solo performance throughout our process. So that was quite dope.
My name is Connor Rock. I am a freshman in the acting BFA. I'm kind of on the opposite end of a lot of our seniors because I came in, this is my first show I've done at Towson. I've done a couple concerts, I've done a couple cabarets my time here, but it's my first show here. And I just jumping right into the deep end was just like this insane process of like Mungo said, like not saying no to anything, getting to dive headfirst into devising. It was very cool. Got like really scratched some creative itches, and it was probably emotionally the most fulfilling show I've done. So it was really cool.
I'm Jaelyn, she, they. I was actually really terrified when we started this process. I was terrified, and then as we went through it, it made me think so much more of what acting can be and what performance can be, and I learned so much from my castmates and the crew, and it really helped me grow in a lot of ways. So I really appreciated this process.
I'll come over here. Hi, I'm Charlie. I use he, him. I was the stage manager. It was definitely a weird process. I have never done devised theater before, so I was just writing down everything everyone said for weeks. But it was really interesting to see you all create the show yourselves. Like, that's something I had never seen happen, and you guys got to make it so personal and so fulfilling to you. And it was kind of great to, over the course of the show, watch it grow, and then watch all of the performances and be like, wow, we did all of that. It was pretty cool.
Shout out to y'all.
Woo-woo.
Shout out to your
delicious
sausage.
So
We can say no.
I want to know what kind of sauce. Like, is it Italian? Is it like beef? Okay.
What does the sausage taste?
Go ahead.
Yep. What does the sausage taste like? Dramaturgy.
What does it smell like?
Okay.
I have no idea how to answer that.
Dusty.
It's almost floral. Fill you up, actually.
So, Liz Lerman's critical response process.
Yes.
We will be fulfilling, following.
You mean, should I say something?
Please.
Yeah, so it's slightly modified, obviously, right? In that, spoiler alert, this show will never happen again. Not in the same way. It can't. It can't ever happen again, which is really beautiful. But what it means is that we are not sort of building this conversation as a response to an active work in progress that can change and grow. So some of the steps are like slightly different, right? So I think a space that we would want to spend the most time here is in steps 2 and 3, which would be questions from us as artists to our 3 MFA podcast hosts and audience members who saw the show. So questions we have about audience experience, and then questions they have about the process and about choices, things like this. And if there is any step 4s, which would be opinions, right? Those would be responses to choices generally that we made as artists that would be useful to you going forward. So for example, if I was like in the process, I might ask a step 2 about transitions between scenes. I might say, here's what I was hoping for. What was your experience around it? If we get then to step 4, Jam might say, I have an opinion about that style of transition, and a way that it made me feel, or a way that it could be like more enhanced if you'd like to hear it, right? So we're thinking generally about the things we were all exploring as artists in this process and things we're curious about and would hope perhaps in the future to continue like revisiting. Yeah. Does that all make sense?
Mm-hmm. And a refresher.
Step one, statements
is,
of meaning.
Right.
Which, that's an opportunity, I think, for the three of you to just offer us some entry points, some little grounding things, some particular like moments you want to highlight in the show that can then kind of lead us in perhaps to questions. So statements of meaning, just moments that you found meaningful, exciting, provocative, challenging, anything and everything. I think we don't need to spend a ton of time on this one.
Good.
Yeah.
Good. Great. We just had someone enter into the space. So everyone went around and said their names, pronouns, and what was something that was important to you about the process, or something that you appreciated.
So I'm Nadia. I use they, them pronouns. And something that was important to me, I don't know, there was a lot of healing through this process, I feel. It's hard to dissect your grief and then perform it. And it's even harder to heal from that. And I think that was really amazing that we were all able to find a little piece of closure.
Thank you, Nadia. All right. I have a statement of meaning. This play was super important to me as someone who is human and who grieves. The essence of it as a show in the space of ephemera, which is like here now and then gone, and we just sort of see the shadows of it, which I feel is grief. So that's my meaning. A theatrical statement of meaning was how you guys use this space. That alleyway seating was really beautiful, but also I noticed that there were superimposed images within this production. So, for example, you have one scene where you have Power on the platform under that arch. And we throw paper at Power. And then the next scene, we're back into our folktale of the Dust Bowl, and Power is standing right where that was. And it was, I took my breath away. It's like topography in the space, but created through time.
Wow.
Yeah. Wow.
Snap.
Yeah. It was even beautiful hearing you say that. Jim, do you want to go? Please. Oh, I don't mind if I do. I was struck by the set coming in. It's one of those sets that are striking, and it instantly made me go, what is about to happen? Because something is about to happen here. I don't get to see like the show start right when people are coming in, but there were some individuals, like you all were like actually already in your roles, like which I thought made me think about something that was brought up in our dramaturgy class, maybe about when does the play actually start. And so I was struck by seeing actually like actors on the set while people are coming in. That instantly caught my attention. And I also was struck by when I instantly realized, they are not about to tell this story traditionally. And there was something exciting about that in that moment when I realized, okay, we're going to go on a journey, one that we think that we're familiar with, but it's about to be a ride. And that was exciting.
I was struck by everyone's intelligent use of clowns as provocateurs of power.
I went home, back to my home, and I was like, y'all, we are just a bunch of disobedient clowns. Let's go. So it's my new aesthetic. Yeah. I'm wearing it on Tuesdays.
We're in your clown era.
Yeah.
I'm happy we can help you with that.
Yeah, for sure. Well, let's move on to 2.
Yeah. So I've been thinking about this actually, or I was thinking about this during the weeks of our performances a lot. Was I was just really curious about everyone's experience of having friends see the show and then hearing what they say afterwards, or talking or not talking about the show afterwards, which is always a weird space. So I think this is sort of a useful moment to kind of intentionally ask, what did you think about this particular thing, right? Like, I have not been able to talk to anyone about it, or I have, and I've heard like 70 different things. So questions from our ensemble, like, what are you curious about from these three folks as audience members? Connor, you got something?
Did y'all close your eyes?
Yes.
Is this still recording?
Oh, thank you for
I
noting.
think it like just stopped.
Thank you for noting that. I might have to do another one, but we're still recording on the iPad.
Good.
Okay. Yeah, I did. Well, I saw it twice, and the first time I saw it, I don't know why I was glitching. I was like, close your eyes. I was like, am I going to miss something? I was like, did he say both eyes? Did they say both eyes? Okay, do it. Okay, just do it. Just like, it's kind of like, just do it, And there was something in that moment. And then when I finally closed my eyes, and then you were like, thank you. I was like, oh snap. I did it, The second time was natural. Just let me close my eyes. Like, there was still something, there was meaningful, like, in that process but I think the first time I wanted to see if other people were closing their eyes. And I was like, see, look at you, Chanel, being nosy, talking to you. I peeked. Yeah, I peeked. But to say that this show put me as an audience member, like, it made me question myself in the middle of it. I felt like I actually maybe indulged a little bit too much in grieving during the show. I was like, oh, I'm just gonna let go, crying. And then I was like, wait, no, I just, like, how do I as an audience member in this space be respectful to what's happening on stage, and then also, like, respectful to what's happening in myself? And then and there's also the dynamic of there are things being asked of us. So I had a lot of internal conversations about being an audience member in that moment, because of your play.
Oh, that's a good question. What else?
The first thing I always asked anyone about was about our scene, Elephant Antigone, because it's really abstract, and we do some animal work in it before, and then we have all this text just like coming at you in like a rapid fire way. And so the two questions I've been asking like all of my friends about it. First one was like, did you get that it was about animals? Second, did you get that it was about us using animal rituals to grieve? Or third, was there another meaning that, like, just hearing, because I talked to Jay about this, and Jay was like, just the hearing of the Towson bereavement procedure, just hearing about the whale, just hearing about this stuff. He was like, at first I didn't necessarily connect it all, but it had a new, totally different meaning to me. Just through witnessing the exertion that was occurring and just a performance within itself. So I guess what was your reaction to us on the scaffolding with the ropes and all that stuff in the paper and whatnot?
That's the moment that emotionally assassinated me. That was, it was the moment that I was like, stopped watching theater and was watching mind-blowing gesture. It was also, I felt like afterwards, like, it felt like something that would be created within Fargo's process. But like, in that, I'd like to say, one of the things that I am grieving is a pet bird. And so the animal instantly came in and was a thing, and then Lenox up on the scaffolding being the bird. That was the Jan was like, "Are you okay?" And I was like, yeah. So
I'm so sorry.
No, it's okay. No, it was beautiful. Yeah, I was almost like, wow, I peaked early in emotional turmoil, and I had to bring myself back to experience the rest of the show. For me, it was very jarring because visually, there's something about me that wants to like make sure I'm not missing anything, like. But it's hard not to do that, like, with so many things happening at once. And then I start seeing the physical exertion. And I remember something that you said, Fargo, is like how fascinated you are with, like, physical exertion and performance. And I don't know if I realized that was something that I was quite interested in, too. But it made me think of, like, once I saw you all doing everything simultaneously, I had no choice but to be provoked emotionally, because it made me think about all of the times that I had to push through certain things, even though I was grieving or I had to go to work or whatever the case may be, that and I was like, focus, we're at a performance. Because then, you know, you start experiencing yourself, and that's the moment where I'm like, I'm had. I'm taken.
Y'all got me.
So tough.
It's funny, actually, just thinking about that. I mean, when we first arrived at, like, what if there's animals in the show? I did not expect it to be the one that was the most, like, emotionally resonant for me, like, consistently throughout. That's certainly the section that I cried at, like, the most, watching you all perform. In the pairing, I think, sort of this question, Francesco, of, like, especially that scaffolding moment, which is, like, a pairing of specific sort of abstracted movements with just text, made me think of sort of, like, actually something that Liz Lerman taught me, which is that it's oftentimes really, really powerful to just layer on any set of movements onto a piece of text, for example. Because what will happen is that you will automatically both make connections between the movement and the text, and also they'll start to shape each other. So there's a way in which, like, when we kind of built those things, we sort of did it separately, right? It was a little bit of, like, we know we want to be, like, on the scaffolding doing a thing, and then let's, like, gradually find out what that is. And then we didn't rehearse with, like, the text was kind of separate, right? The text, like, sat on top of it. But for me, that movement that you all came up with and designed and, like, refined over the process became so meaningful because I started making connections that, like, could only exist just because we had smashed these two things together, right? So it's so much for me of, like, creating these webs and structures that we get stuck in, which is one thing that the exertion really means a lot within. But then for me, one of the most meaningful parts is that, like, at a certain point, you just undo it, right? And it's a reminder. It's sort of like that moment in the show when Jaelyn says, like, you didn't have to go through the web, right? It's that reminder that, like, the things we make, we can also unmake. And so the process of watching you all, like, gradually get out of that thing and then go to somewhere else was really beautiful. And something that I never, like, just reading that text, I never would have thought of. And just seeing those movements by themselves, I maybe would have thought of, but it wouldn't have meant the same thing as it did when hearing, as you kind of mentioned, like as Jay pointed out, right, hearing those words lent those things meaning. Which is really interesting.
Mungo just texted me in all caps, gutter space.
So true. Yeah.
Dude, I'd like to add, I have to sing some praises to EJ and our ensemble overall throughout the process of building that piece, to leaning into the decision of us not reading the text.
Oh, yeah.
It gave so much to the exertion that the text and the piece overall really, really needed. And I think we were able to explore way more. Does anyone have anything to...
Well, just to say, to clarify, like, for most of the time, I thought I was also going to force them all to say the lines, like, live, while they were doing these things. And at a certain point, EJ, we were rehearsing, and EJ was like, I don't think that's going to work. Like, straight up. And I was like, oh, yeah, that is so correct. Like, it would just be so much extra things. And it did just, like, open up so much opportunity. Number one, it was a really useful, practical choice. And then number two, it really allowed you to, like, live inside of that physical movement in a way you wouldn't have been able to do if you were, like, trying to listen for the cue and then also, like, project over the noise of you guys crumpling paper. Yeah. There's just a lot of things that, like, again, sort of, it's both a practical decision, but also a performative decision.
And I was captivated by how each of you really gave yourselves to that part. I mean, I could physically, it's like, I felt a part of that connection by watching you all give yourselves to that, to the motion, to the physicality, to the exertion, and I don't think saying the script would have,
Yeah, I was going to say, one thing that's interesting, like, in comparing, like, text with task at the same time is, like, specifically with the Home Thieves, where we are having that text on top of what we're doing, and how much the text becomes influenced by what's happening with the objects in the moment. And I think that the Antigone, that section, I think would have probably lost a little something, because I think there is power in how reserved the text becomes, because it was recorded separately. And I forget who mentioned it, but one of the wonderful members of this ensemble was like, it's more like you're at the zoo watching creatures and you're listening to, you know, the overhead speakers or whatever talk about what you're viewing, and I think we would have lost that if we were doing the text in the moment, because we would have been so heavily influenced by the physicality within our bodies.
It was quite nice to, in the devising process, to build that structure of text, but then also to break that down. And I think that was something that some of us had to get used to. Day by day, it's like, oh, we built this thing. Oh, now it's gone. So
I think another really interesting part about Elephantigone in general was just the fact that it was like one of the only times in the show where we had other people reading what other people, like personal things that other people wrote. Like either their stories of grieving or their stories of this, that, and the other thing. And there were some people that read like their own things, right? Like I know Will did and stuff like that. But I thought that was really interesting, like just to have other people say what other people wrote and express that grief for them.
I kind of want to go back to what Lenox touched upon when like first building the Elephantigone structures, when we were first figuring out how to devise it. I remember we came up with the idea of the pro noises like day one. We're like it was like this tiny little scene that we had. Like, I don't think this scene's gonna work. And I was like, oh, okay. And then just being able to bring like that element of it, and we like latched onto into the final product. I was like, yes. I was so happy.
I thought it was also pretty interesting, Lenox, what you brought up again about stuff we had made and then taking it apart. In that moment, we ended up doing it quite literally because our props person didn't get the big sheets of paper to us that they were ripping apart. So what instead we were using in the rehearsal process was, at the beginning of the rehearsal process when we were still devising, we had big sheets of butcher paper that people wrote all of their ideas on, and we had different categories and thoughts of things we did, and since we didn't have paper yet for that moment, they ended up tearing apart those butcher papers we used earlier in the process. And it was kind of an unintentional thing just because it's what we had and what we needed, but I feel like it did make an interesting point that we ended up destroying that in making our new thing.
That was one of the things, though. When we were doing rehearsals with that, during that scene, we would always, like Lenox, me, and Carlos, who's unfortunately not here, but we would always, like, up on the top, we'd say, what are we saying goodbye to today? Like whatever, like, subject it was. It was like a nice ritual.
Smells.
He
smells.
Also, Mungo wants to talk a little bit about the process of like talking about how we went from the butcher paper and how we went from like all the way to getting to Elephantigone. What do you want to say, Mungo?
I just want to say it's interesting how resonant that piece became for all of us and all the people in the audience, especially because there was like a moment where we were like thinking about just dropping it from the show entirely in a small cluster group because of the way that kind of the process whisked us onto another thing, and I think it kind of fell to the wayside, and we were so caught up in this other part of the Dust Bowl section that we were like, I don't know if this elephant thing has a room in the show, and I'm incredibly grateful to I don't know, there was a few people who were like, actually I think it really does resonate, and picking it up and kind of championing it through to where it flourished and became such an important part of the show.
Thank you.
Yeah. What else are we curious about? I want to ask,
I do have something about 4, so that's why I'm like, let me just say what I want to say.
Yeah.
I'm curious about how you guys took in the home thieves sections. I know that they're.
So which sections are those, Lenox?
Oh yes.
Yeah.
Oh,
I was
yes.
like, we're
I've
using
noticed,
these
like,
words.
even with
I know,
Elephantigone,
right?
right?
I think it's
like,
really exciting.
All this code language that we have.
We should have brought a copy of the script.
I was literally going to ask a question that was like, is there a script document that was from it? That would be great. That's lovely.
So describe those sections in particular.
So home thieves were the sections where we had to cover the body. As you guys know, at the beginning of Antigone Cacophony, we reveal that there is a body that we all have to cover. We're using dust and words and tears and breath as Mario added to our script to do so. So it kind of plays as like an interlude for each of our acts. So we start off with 4 of the ensemble members, then 3, and then we close out the show with 3 as well. And then we all come together and realize that to cover the body, we need all of us, not just our individual processes or item.
What's the specific curiosity you have?
My specific curiosity was how those sections were received, knowing that there was verbal text from not just one performer, but like 3 to 4.
Mm-hmm.
Then there's a sound happening, like tech-wise, but there's also the movement.
Mm-hmm.
How is the audience receiving that? Is there a specific moment that stood out to you between the 3 home theme sections? And just curious, if you were to cover the body, like what would you use? Or what would be your thing? That's too wild. Sorry, we're here.
Yeah, I remember Rowan's piece with the red string with a heart. And I remember feeling a desperation, like, cover it, like, you can do it, like, you know. And then there is something in the process, even with watching Will with the cards going, I was going, oh my gosh, what is happening? It's not getting covered. Like, there was something that was like, because and I think it was subconscious too, because I was like, no, it's happening. Okay, it's happening. It's good. And then here comes EJ with the rope. I'm like, oh my gosh, everybody's trying to cover their own body in their own kind of way, and like watching like how it was intersectionality in that, but it also was a disruption, and there was no peace. And I remember thinking like there was a sense of urgency in that, but there is no rest in that. That struck me.
It struck me as really as a structure. At some point after I sort of was examining it in my head as like a collection of structures, which I guess Fargo is in my brain. Can't get him out. It was quite powerful, and it all leading up to that last moment of, and then that's enough. And that's enough is like my favorite ending to a play ever. TM Kaidandero 2023. If I was gonna cover a body that I couldn't cover, I think I'd cover it in feathers. Yeah, they'd all float. Like you set one down and it'd all fly away.
Oh, that's so good. We should have thought about
that. I could have gotten you feathers too.
Feathers next time.
You know I do dirt. I just do so much dirt.
Dirt.
Oh,
I loved.
I was like, remember when I said that we would never do this show again?
Unfortunately,
rewrite.
No, we have
to.
Get
a separate contract.
I also was really, really struck by how. Oh, and when you were asking the question, those sections felt like a cacophony. I was trying to figure out I was like, where is the cacophony? I mean, the whole thing is the cacophony, but that was the cacophony. And I think it's because I didn't really get everyone's story because of the way that the text was. Like someone ended in the middle of a sentence, and I always felt like I missed the most important part because something else was happening. And to that was like, that became that unseeable, unknowable sound mass that is the cacophony of, I suppose, grief.
Metaphorically and physically happening.
Yeah.
It's funny you called them an interlude, Lennox, because I always thought of them as like the spine of the show.
Yeah.
I always thought of them as like the heart, really.
Yeah, I just couldn't bring up the right word. But
Yeah.
Here we are.
Well, you do. Where a literal heartbeat happens.
So maybe we can move to questions from you guys, if that feels okay for everyone, unless there was a specific curiosity that we didn't get to. Excellent. What are you all curious about? What do you want to interrogate our ensemble members with?
I'm really curious about the process of integrating tech and design from from the resources of the college, and like how was like that process of having sort of, did you have outside designers or and sort of curious like what your production meetings looked like if you had them.
Yeah. I'll go through it quickly, right?
Okay.
So all our designers were faculty members, and our props designer was a student. So the way that it worked, right, is there's like department procedures and policies for devised productions and working with designers in that process, right? Cool. Especially with this kind of project where we knew nothing at the start. We didn't know anything at all. Yeah. So it was a balance of two things, right? One was me coming in and making some decisions about like, here's kind of what I don't know anything about what's going to happen in it, but here's sort of what I think the world of the performance looks like. And here are some ways to approach it. And so one of the department procedures is that like what they can do is just give you a bunch of stuff to play with at the beginning, right? So that it's already incorporated into the process of making things, so that like we don't get 4 or 5 weeks in and then say like, great, it takes place at a castle, and it's period accurate. Everyone's got like a lot of night stuff. Okay, right. So to avoid that, right, what we did is say like, we're going to get a bunch of stuff as early in the process as we can and start using it in our devising. And so for me, it was like, okay, what are the kind of things that we want to use, right? Mm-hmm. So based on what I thought about how the structure of the play was going to go, I said to our designers and folks, like, I think what we want is a bunch of materials rather than like objects, right? So cloth that can be a bunch of different things. Cardboard can be a bunch of different things, right? And they're kind of interesting to me aesthetically anyway. Rope can be a bunch of different things. So it's basically accumulating a whole bunch of things that we can use in the style of the performance that we made, which was kind of like a group of people just kind of getting together and finding whatever they can to make this performance. And so really being economical in the performance with like, this hat that serves as Jaelyn's police hat in one scene is going to do something else in another scene. So production meetings were a lot of like, here's another thing that I would like. Can we have like a roll of butcher paper? And then as we got further and further, I said to the designers, like, at this point in the process, I will propose to you what the shape of the show looks like. We're going to know like basically what's happening. And then in 2 weeks after that, we're going to have a script, right? And so just like finding very particular benchmarks to stick to, which was helpful for us in the process because it was like, okay, at this point, we're going to stop making new stuff and we got to lock some things in, right? Yeah. And then we're moving to discovering like new things in performance versus like we're creating new materials. Does that make sense? Does that answer your question?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Okay. My question is, throughout the devising process, there was like a piece by piece, like when did you all know like, oh, this section, we're keeping this section, and this should be with this because that goes, or let's just put it in there. Like, when did you all realize this is the puzzle that fits?
Did someone want to say something? Sometimes we just had a brain blast, and then we brought it to the like people would bring things to the group, and then everyone would be like, yeah, that's epic. So like the Dust Bowl scenes, for example. It was me, Nadia, Mungo, and Carlos. And we were just sitting there and came up with it and then like presented it to Fargo first. And Fargo's like, that's what's up. And then we presented it to everyone else and they were like, that's what's up. So like, it was just kind of like, I don't know. Does anyone else have anything else they want to say on it? Because I just can't think of, I'm forgetting things that got shut down.
There was a point in the process right before Fargo like sat down and actually wrote it all out where we were all like, what is everything we've done in this process and what do we want to keep? Just like think back to everything from the first rehearsal that you loved and or that you thought was interesting and just put it out there that you wanted in this. And we all said a certain scene, like Lennox's Stitch, I remember I said, I like that. I want to see that again. And we all just said something we liked and wanted to see again. And we were like, okay, that'll be in the show. Or
that was something we saw one time, like week 2.
It was,
and we hadn't really revisited it, and it was just like, oh, that could fit in the structure. Yeah.
Kind of combining both. There was like a day where there was like a span of a couple weeks where we were like all in different groups, like working on different like structures or ideas. Like there was Dust Bowl, there was the clowns, and there was a group of us that was like home scenes. I remember us banging our heads against the wall, seeing what would fit because it was very emotional. It was a very hard part of the show to try and figure out. And I do remember one day that actually did lead to a couple ideas that I kept around for like that inspired me to do like a couple of to do my Stitch with the audience closing their eyes, which was point in that. But also, I do remember our day where we just all of us as a group just had a day to sit, think, and write out our home themes. And I remember that day just being really satisfying, I guess is the word I'm going for. It was definitely, after we had like laid out the structure, like this is what we want, like the home thieves section to like accomplish, do, etc. I was like, okay, I sat myself down, I put myself in the zone. I was like, I'm like, this feels right. It felt right. That's the best way I can describe it as.
Yeah, that was the hardest part.
Yeah.
and I feel I did not envy you guys.
I was gonna say I feel incredibly thankful for having Fargo at the helm, because, and I told Fargo this at a certain point in the process. I was like, "You're a master of structures." And I once had another artist tell me that inspiration is great, but when it comes to just like being able to create all the time, structures are your best friend. So we knew early on that we were taking the structure from Antigone of, there's a decree, there's resistance, there's a crackdown, and then we're left with the pieces at the end. And what does that look like was a question for a lot of the process. But then we kind of split that into our subsections, which Connor was just talking about, where it's like, all right, these people are devising, clown bits kind of around those structure pieces, or we're designing the home thieves bits around those structure pieces. But then also Fargo was wonderful because on top of doing that with the structures, there were also times where Fargo was like, just create anything and we're just gonna, look at it in a little bit. And that led to wonderful moments like Mungo's poem that ended up in the show was from one of those moments, I believe. And that was really helpful. And then since we had that structure to build off of, the day we actually sat down to decide where the pieces went, it was more like just putting a puzzle together, and we were shocked by how well the pieces fit automatically because we had that structure in the beginning.
We had a long time to do this. I mean, not relative to how long you should write a play.
I don't know about that. A long time.
My point is, we had like a month and a half of writing time, and everyone came up with so many incredible ideas over the course of that time, which is why it was such a difficult process whittling them down. But I back to what Jaelyn said about Lenox's piece that had been written in some random one-off write something cool moment. It was kind of interesting to go back through how many things you all wrote, because I do think that was probably the hardest part for Fargo, at least, is because you guys wrote so much amazing stuff that we just could not fit because we were trying to keep it an hour and a half, and if we put everything great, it'd be like 4 hours.
Yeah.
But it was really great to go back through because there's moments that we dropped and thought we might never visit again. Lenox had his stitch and we were like, that's cool, and we never brought it up. And then it finally got brought back, and I think that was really important that we kept in mind everything we did that entire months of time that we were writing.
So I was gonna say, when it came to writing, first and foremost, Fargo, you made us feel very, very comfortable with the writing process when it comes to devising. It can be so stressful, and I really want to applaud my ensemble members for writing Dust Bowl.
That was incredible.
Was
so sick,
so dope. I remember when David White had came in, one of our professors here at Towson, to talk about writing for devising and stuff, specifically about continuity, or having a little piece here that connects to a piece later on. And you guys ran with that, ran with it. I kind of want to just hear from you guys. What did you guys think about that? Because I wasn't part of that game until later. So.
Dust Bowl was big. One day we walked in, Fargo had a bunch of cards for us. We had all split up into groups at this point. So we had our home thieves people, and then we had our clowns, and then we had us. And we had these note cards, and they all had words on them to kind of inspire us. And I think one of them was just dust, or one of them wasn't dust, and we made it up because we started making our own cards.
Sorry,
And I think I made an offhand comment. I was like, guys, what if we put the Dust Bowl in it? And then we moved on, and we started talking about Antigone. And then we come back, and we're like, yeah, what if we do the Dust Bowl? And then we just did, and we kept going, and we started researching a lot about the Dust Bowl. I think I know Mungo and Francesco and I had a group chat, and it's just filled with like songs from the Dust Bowl and documentaries and other works that we wanted to read. I read through about 100 pages of diaries from people who lived in the Dust Bowl. So we did a lot of work with that, and then we wrote some of it here, and then we went to Mungo's house and we wrote it all in one night.
Yeah. I also just distinctly remember the way that you all introduced it, which was we think it would be funny. But here's the thing: you said we think it would be funny if in this like sort of experimental abstract performance piece there was just a scene, like a straightforward traditional theatrical scene, which was kind of the first like thing. Yeah. And then you were like, and it maybe takes place during the Dust Bowl. And so it was beginning with that idea of like it would be kind of like another little surprise to just have a theatrical like straight play kind of scene. And then it's just really fascinating to watch that evolve into something that was so like thematically resonant with the rest of what the show was doing. But it started off really as a performance choice, and like a choice about the vibe of like one scene to the next. Yeah. It was just such a really fascinating way to start.
Yeah, I think that is like the biggest thing is, again, the Dust Bowl started one-off comment from Nadia, and then it was like kind of a joke, and we're like, that would make sense. But then we did get really hooked on the idea of like, okay, we want there to be a straight play though. Like we want something serious here, and then we just found out we already had it. Yeah. So.
May I respond to the Dust Bowl section? Yeah. I really thought thematically that it really worked, and I really thought it was funny, but also I was like, wow, smart. Straight play moment in here. Also something we say about like clown performance structure of like we're just an ensemble of clowns putting on a performance. It's like a new format. I kind of like it. But the Dust Bowl section, I don't know if it was with this section or sometime earlier in the play, but you're like, usually Greek plays are sung. Let's sing it for you. Ha ha ha. Wait, no, we don't know Greek, so we're not going to sing it for you. And it made me think about like myths, and it's like that is a myth from so long ago, but then it came around to like, okay, so let's tell sort of like an American story that's sort of like, it felt like a folktale from a more recent but still distant, like I don't have any context for the Dust Bowl. Right. Like recent but distant story that still resonates and feels like a folk tale, folk about something, and that whole the idea of like the folk song aesthetic as like universal was just so beautiful. And I will never forget it. And it will carry on with me for my whole life.
I was singing that song.
Oh, yeah.
Good.
In class, and all
Maybe
of a
we
sudden
should end
started
it.
singing that old song. And it just continues to come out. Yeah.
Every night I was scanning the audience to be like, who's singing? Are they singing?
Bye, Lennox.
Bye, Lennox.
My beautiful people, I love you all.
Thank you for all your hard work.
We're just going to do one more question to wrap up.
Sure.
Yeah.
So, do you have a
What do you think of the question? Specifically with that idea around the Dust Bowl, it made me think of. I think I shared this at some point very briefly in our like early devising process, but I saw a tweet by someone that actually really unlocked a lot of things, which was like that a lot of times when we talk about the Greek tragedies, it's like it's hard for like contemporary readers to understand because we don't really believe in gods the way that they did, right? Generally speaking, right? We don't necessarily believe that like someone is directly meddling in like anything that happens, and we don't have any control over our fate. And the writer Kay Gabriel was like, yeah, but also like the systems we live under are basically that, right? Like how different from Zeus is like poverty, right? Or a catastrophic environmental impact like the Dust Bowl, right? Where it is like, well, I have no control over this and it's shaping every aspect of my life, right? So, thinking about that connection between Antigone specifically, which is very much about like, well, I guess it was fate, basically. And at the end of the day, like pretty much everybody's dead and just call it another Greek day. But so, yeah, just finding that as a resonance was like really useful to be like, oh, there is this connection between these
Yes. It's indulge me. One more question. Why Antigone?
I'm gonna turn it to you guys because I know my answer.
Yeah. Should I? You want to say something?
No.
Well, as far
Fargo told us that's what we were doing.
Right. So
It's
it
called
was really scary. We walked into 3058 and like the lights were off. And Fargo was just sitting there on the ground and telling us to do it.
Yeah.
But I think the reason why Antigone and
Dramatic entrance.
Chef Mott! Chef Mott!
Mungo's here, guys.
Mungo is here.
Mungo arrived for our last question. What's the last question?
Last question is why Antigone?
Do you want to say something? Why Antigone? Holy shit. Why? Yeah, guys. So basically, I think Antigone is really important. Come back to me. But I think and I hope I don't give too much of Fargo's answer away because I'm just gonna kind of say what he told us. Which that Antigone has a history of being used for exploring other issues outside of what it was originally intended for. Obviously, it was a play exploring grief and oppressive forces and things that get in the way of grief, and people started to recognize that and like really break it down to its themes and recontextualize Antigone through all sorts of different media modes. There we go. And funny enough, like
different times and places.
Yeah, all different times and places. While we were in the thick of Antigone, me, Nadia, and Mungo are in another show right now, and one of the people that we were at auditions with was also doing a production of Antigone called Antigone Now, which is also like a social justice sort of approach to Antigone and stuff like that. So yeah, it just kind of has taken on a legend in a way, or like has been a tool for people to use to express themselves with things that they find thematically resonant. So that's I guess that's why Antigone for me. But go ahead, Fargo. Tell us why.
No.
It's actually my turn. Wait, which way are they going in the circle? Whatever, I'll go. Why Antigone? Because Fargo decided Antigone. Like, to be honest. I don't know if somebody already said that, but...
We started there.
Okay. Well then, I guess it was kind of like, as someone who never read Antigone, it was sort of like I was asking myself that question throughout the whole process. I was like, why is this... And I guess I sort of just bought into it because I was having such a good time. But a lot of the time I was like, what does this really have to do with anything? And then I think through the process, it became like more meaningful to me. Like I was like, I mean, my piece was about forgetting. And the whole thing was about like me not really understanding the grief. And we had this whole moment where we were like, all right, guys, like, let's take a moment. We'll figure out what your personal Antigone was. And I was like, I don't have one. I don't know where I'm going with this. Like, I was literally, me and Francesco sat there for like 20 minutes, like, hey, dude, like, I don't have nothing. Like, I don't know what we're about to do.
Well, that was me helping you because I had things.
Yeah, no. Francesco had many things to say. I was like, I'm grasping at straws, like, wrench out something. But then finding that grieving doesn't have to be like for a person lost, or it can be for like really anything. And this feeling of grief is like not exclusive to big tragic moments, although it has more resonance in there maybe. But even just losing like anything, you can grieve. You can grieve anything. And that's what this taught me.
Well,
did you want to say why?
I'll say why Antigone.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
And then we'll snack it up. Yeah. So I remember reading Antigone, sort of in a space where most of us will read it in like a high school English class or something like this, right? And being like, sure, it's Greek stuff. And then there was a certain period of time, like a couple of years later, where I just really couldn't stop thinking about it. And then I was like, oh, it would be so epic to do Antigone, but it's like about today. I was like, that would be so sick. And then as I learned more, I was like, oh, people have been doing that for literally hundreds of years. Every like couple decades, someone's like, you won't believe this, Antigone's kind of relevant. So then I started getting really interested in like that process with that play in particular, right? It's true for all sorts of things, right? But the thing that kind of happens, and this is where this whole thing kind of started for me, is like within that, well, number one, I'm just personally obsessed with it, and I have worked with it in a way similar to this process before, in like a book project, but then it became a bunch of other things. And then what generally happens when you restage an ancient text is that you throw on like it's Antigone, but it's set during the Dust Bowl, or it's Antigone, but it's like clowns, or it's Antigone, but it's during freaking the Prohibition. And then what that does is foreclose all the other meanings that are still there inside the text, right? That like you've sort of colored it in with one paint and then you can't color over it. So what I was really curious about was finding with 10, 11 ensemble members, right? Like how many different colors of Antigone can we get in one piece, in like one image, right? And so that's sort of the like impetus of the project. And for me, I stuck with Antigone specifically because I've just like kept coming back to it over the last couple of years, because to me, it's about grief, yes, but it is also very much about like how you live in a world that's really fucked up. And it doesn't have very easy answers about it, right? I mean, there's a line that Jaelyn says in the play that's like, you know, one way of thinking about it is that Antigone is the only person in Antigone who gets what she wants. She like dies, but she's the only one who does exactly what she says she's going to do the whole time. And that's not an easy answer about like, how do you live in a really fucked up, violent world that is cruel to you every single day? But it's an answer. And so for me, I just am like really drawn to the ways that text positions what it's like to live under power. And it's been really useful and important to me, and I was curious about if it could be useful and important to others. So that's why Antigone. Also, I know it pretty well.
And it just didn't work, huh? So
yeah, it didn't work at all.
No one got it. No one.
It did. No, it worked.
Well, this has been a wonderful conversation. I am so grateful for each of your input and your contributions. I was moved by the work, and it will live with me, and I will definitely be carrying it on in my own, even if it's just singing the song.
Yeah. Beautiful. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
This is Seven Stages Podcast. Jam out. All right.